webinar provides of women in science, technology, engineering, and math. Initially, we looked at what STEM is and the importance of women working in STEM careers. Then we took a bit of time to examine the lack of women in STEM careers currently and the reasons why women are so sorely underrepresented in STEM careers. Lastly, we discussed a number of pathways to pursuing a career in STEM. The link to the first Breaking Barriers webinar will be included in a post-webinar email with similarly helpful resources. So if you missed the first webinar, don't fret. We'll have a chance to share that with you in the email that we will send following today's presentation. So what are we up to today? So thank you for joining us. Today's webinar, we will look more in depth at the concept of stereotypes and what stereotypes mean for women in STEM careers. In the first instance, we'll take a closer look at what stereotypes are and how they're constructed before we examine practical ways to change, challenge, and overcome these stereotypes of women in STEM careers. We'll also have a chance to look in depth at some inspirational STEM role models who've overcome obstacles and adversity themselves in their STEM careers. Then I will be pleased to introduce you to some team members from Avanade, from our partner Avanade, and a panel with female staff so you can hear firsthand the sorts of stereotypes that they've faced and how they've overcome those. And before we wrap up, we will have a chance to answer your questions. So really keep in mind you can ask questions at any time throughout the webinar. Simply type them in your instant messenger box within the Skype application, and we will do our best to answer them at the end of the webinar. So let's begin. I'm going to start with a bit of time to unpack what stereotypes are. So stereotypes. They are assumptions or generalizations that people make about the characteristics of all members of a group, about what the people in that group are like. The assumptions or generalizations are based on an image which is often incorrect. Just as a little bit of a history lesson, this term stereotype was first used by a French printer, Didot, in 1798. He used the term to refer to a printing process used to create reproductions. As a result, stereotypes were likened to pictures in the head or mental reproductions of reality. So while the use of stereotypes is a way in which we as people simplify our social world by reducing the amount of processing or thinking required when we meet a new person, that said, stereotypes can have many negative, many long-term impacts. So by stereotyping someone, we infer that a person has a whole range of characteristics and abilities that we assume all members of the group have or don't have. One of the major downfalls of this attitude is that stereotypes make us ignore the differences between individuals and can lead to generalizations or assumptions that might not be true. In this way, stereotypes lead to social categorization, which is one of the reasons for prejudiced attitudes. Now, this concept of prejudice is difficult to define precisely, but most social scientists agree that it involves a prejudgment, usually negative, about a group or its members. Prejudice is beyond just a mere statement of opinion or belief. It's an attitude that includes an emotion. It could include contempt, dislike, or loathing. Stereotypes aren't just harmful on their own. They do damage by creating a platform for prejudice and for discrimination. So what's discrimination? Discrimination involves putting group members at a disadvantage or treating them unfairly as a result of a prejudiced attitude, which stems from stereotypes. While stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination are separate concepts, all three are interrelated and cannot exist without the other. For example, stereotypes can lead to prejudice within a person towards a certain group, and the outward expression of the stereotype prejudice, that's what's discrimination. So where do stereotypes come from? Psychologists explain that people partly develop stereotypes through personal experience. But because stereotypes are part of the beliefs and shared assumptions that societies have about different types of people and groups, they are also part of the society's collective knowledge. In order for a society to socialize,
we rely on the accuracy and completeness of your responses to provide information tailored to your inquiry.
Stereotypes can be explicitly and subtly taught. An example of overt stereotyping is a parent telling their daughter that she can't be an engineer. Subtle stereotyping can be found in everything from children's toys to clothing. Gender stereotypes can originate from or be exacerbated by repetition through media and pop culture, something that I think we all have quite a lot of experience with and exposure to. Now, stereotypes are ingrained in society from a young age. Research has shown that at even just 2 years old, children are aware of and affected by gender role stereotypes. During the early years, ages 2 to 6, as children are acquiring gender role knowledge, they can be fairly rigid in their application of gender role stereotypes and harsh in their evaluations of gender norm violations. So, for example, when children question their environment, children might say, "Hey, who typically becomes a doctor and who typically wears pink? Can a man grow up to be a nurse?" An example of the effect of the media on gender perception in young children comes from a mother who commented that her eldest daughter was just 4 years old at home with her father the day that Julia Gillard became Australia's first female prime minister. When the mom arrived home from work, her daughter rushed excitedly to tell her that she was going to be prime minister when she grew up, because that was a job for girls. So that 4-year-old's exposure to the fact that the Prime Minister of Australia is a woman made her think that that's what women do. That is a job for girls. Now, colored and gendered toys also shape the way that children perceive each other and themselves. Sociologists have researched into the relationship between gender and toys. Studies have found that gendered toys do shape children's play preferences and styles. This is because gendered toys limit the range of skills and attributes that both boys and girls can explore through play, and can prevent children from developing their full range of interests, preferences, and talents. The effects of toys and how they're marketed should not be underemphasized. Research shows that by later primary age, children already have very clear ideas about the jobs that are suitable for boys and those that are suitable for girls. These gendered ideas are much harder to shake as time goes on. Children's toys shape the way that they perceive themselves and their gender from a very young age. Toys help children develop life skills and explore their imagination. However, if only certain toys are given to certain genders, it subtly ingrains in children what gender roles are and affects how they see themselves. This, in turn, can have long-term effects on which skills they invest as they grow older and which career path they choose. Now, this is an interesting one. So I was around in 92. Some of you on the call probably were not. But in 1992, the Teen Talk Barbie dolls were released to be sold. These Teen Talk Barbie dolls were programmed to say, "Math class is tough." As you can imagine, controversy ensued surrounding the sale of the dolls, particularly, and rightly so, by the broader STEM community. As a result, the Barbie company, Mattel, were forced to offer to trade an inoffensive version of the doll for the ones that were programmed to say the phrase. Mattel's president then wrote a letter to address the controversy, stating that they didn't fully consider the negative implications of this phrase. Now, gosh, I sure hope we've come a long way since that one, but that's a pretty startling story, really, that a Barbie would have said, "Math class is tough." It's terrible, isn't it? Now, another example of gender toys is the Big Book of Stuff book series. They've made both a male and a female edition of the book. Some of you are probably familiar with it. The male edition, the Big Book of Boy Stuff, that cover asks, "How can I make lightning? How can I make a rocket?" Which implies that curiosity about science falls under boy stuff. That's the domain of boys only, right? Whereas the Girl Stuff edition, it doesn't ask equivalent STEM-related or even academically minded questions. The Big Book of Girl Stuff does ask, "What should I charge for babysitting?" which repeats the association of females taking care of children. Another speech bubble on Big Book of Girl Stuff asks the question, "How can I give the perfect compliment?" Now, that's a question that truly could be relevant to both males and females and should not come exclusively under Girl Stuff. More broadly, retailers are using 1950s era stereotypes to market toys to children. Play Unlimited said that anything to do with domesticity, beauty, and nurturing is allocated to girls, while the boys section contains toys which encourage action, violence, building, and construction. Now, Some toy sellers, such as Target and Big W, no longer have toys marked as specifically for girls or for boys on their websites. However, others have sections that differentiate toys along gender lines. This includes sporting equipment, guns, trucks for boys, dolls, makeup, and craft projects for girls. While toys have been given a pink makeover since the 70s, many children's favorite characters have also been glamorized, driving home the message that it's a female's appearance, above all, that counts the most, such as Dora the Explorer and Merida from Brave. However, there have been some improvements. While LEGO was widely criticized for the gender stereotypes in their female-targeted Friends range, it's encouraging that veterinary science is playing a role in Heart Lake City with the new Friends Clinic set. In 2013, LEGO released its first female lab scientist minifigure, Professor C. Baudin. The scientist character wasn't the first LEGO minifig in a STEM profession, but she was the first female scientist character that LEGO created. The release of Professor C. Baudin has brought newfound awareness of persistent gender stereotypes and biases in the children's toy market. Since then, LEGO has taken further steps to address the lack of female characters in STEM fields. There was an overwhelmingly positive response to the Research Institute playset, which was a fan-designed set featuring 3 female scientists that quickly sold out its limited run just last year. The new spaceports sets include female scientists, aerospace engineers, and female astronauts. The Deep Sea Explorers line features a number of female oceanographers and a submersible in the deep sea helicopter set, which appears to pay homage to noted oceanographer Sylvia Earle. Popular Disney Channel character Doc McStuffins has also partnered with LEGO to create a Duplo line, which is aimed at toddlers and very young children. The female protagonist of this Disney show, Doc McStuffins, decides she wants to become a doctor like her mother. She prepares for her dream by being a magical veterinarian to her toys, which come to life. However, it's important to note that with the exception of the Doc McStuffins example, there are no women of color among the new STEM professionals that LEGO has created, so we've obviously still got a ways to go. So what can you do to challenge STEM stereotypes in toys? Check out LEGO Ideas where you can submit your own women in STEM-related set idea. If you get 10,000 supporters, your product gets reviewed by the LEGO Review Board and could become a set sold around the world, which would be pretty cool. So as we move along, I think there are a few more slides to go forward before we catch up. Another area of media and pop culture that is developing in terms of gender stereotypes is emojis. While toys often perpetuate gender stereotypes to young children, emojis perpetuate gender stereotypes to young men and young women. Having emojis that represent quote-unquote male actions separate to quote-unquote female actions limits the way that women can respond or react via emojis in conversations. Gendered emojis also subtly perpetuate stereotypes that can affect how women view themselves, their role in society, and their careers. Now, Google has recently proposed the creation of 13 new female emojis of working women, aimed to promote gender equality in the workplace. The new emojis would include female engineers, chemists, plumbers, and farmers. The Google proposal explained, and I quote, "Given that millions of people across the globe use emojis as an important means of communication, and that women under 30 are the most frequent emoji users by far, it's not surprising that women and men are increasingly vocal about the need for more accurate female representation in emoji professions." The Google team chose professions for its proposal based on labor data and the increasing interest in gender equality in science, technology, engineering, and math. Ultimately, they came up with a list that included jobs in farming, manufacturing, healthcare, technology, business, education, food service, and music. So moving ahead to the next slide, according to the emotional marketing platform Emoji Report, that's a mouthful, of the 92% of online consumers who use emojis, 78% of frequent users are women, compared to 60% of men. There have also been growing concerns about sexism and stereotypes that female emojis can promote. Last month, First Lady of the United States, Michelle Obama, tweeted that she would love to see a girl studying emoji. So you can see that tweet on your screen right now. Emojis that represent women in STEM careers are a great step forward in breaking barriers and challenging stereotypes. There are now also diverse skin colors of emojis within the update, increasing racial diversity and representation within the emoji images. Moving on to the next slide, gender stereotypes can also be perpetuated by the media, and particularly by TV. The media can now target women earlier and more effectively than ever before. You can watch TV at home, stream it on your phone, and access it on a laptop or tablet. A recent report has found Australians watch an average of 97 hours of TV every month. Broken up by day, this adds up to more than 3 hours a day of TV watching, 2 hours on a smartphone, and 1 hour and 47 minutes on a tablet computer. It's really a lot of screen time. The media saturation of gender stereotypes can not only negatively affect women's self-esteem and how they relate to other people, but can also limit a woman's career prospects if she believes what the media tells her that girls should and should not do. In 2014, the Australian TV show Family Feud came under fire and was accused of sexism after asking the two questions of the show: what is a man's job and what is a woman's job? And then they broadcast sexist gender stereotyped answers, which included the top 10 results for a man's job include building, mowing the lawn, bins, mechanic, tradie, fixing things, carpentry, and plumbing. The top 10 results for a woman's job, these included cooking, cleaning, nursing, hairdressing, domestic duties, dishes, receptionist, and washing clothes. Really disappointing. In a recent study, psychologist Sapna Cherian wanted to know if gendered stereotypes had any effect on young women's interest in becoming computer scientists. Specifically, she and her colleagues studied whether the stereotypical view of the geeky male nerd so often portrayed in the media, most recently in the TV show The Big Bang Theory, discouraged women from pursuing computer science degrees. As part of this experiment, she asked undergraduates to describe computer science majors. They found students who were not computer science majors believed computer scientists to be intelligent, but have poor social skills. They also perceived them as liking science fiction and spending hours playing video games. Some participants went so far as to describe computer scientists as thin, pale from being inside all the time, and having poor hygiene. Now, while it's often unintentional, gender assumptions about careers and the continuation of stereotypes can stem from family and societal expectations, and sometimes subconsciously from teachers at school. Now I'd like to shift gears for a moment. With that background, I'd like to invite you to close your eyes. Wherever you are, please close your eyes. Imagine you're in the following situation. Imagine that you are Kate. Kate was studying for her upcoming biology test. She found the human body infinitely fascinating. She was amazed at the intricate functions that occur within the body during everyday life that people aren't even aware of. You don't even have to remember to breathe, she pondered. It's automatic. Sitting at her desk with a hot chocolate, she decided she would have one last read over the textbook before calling it a night. She flicked through the pages, running her eyes over the diagrams and memorizing the scientists who made the discoveries. Claude Bernard, who conceived of the concept of homeostasis. Rudolf Virchow proposed the theory that cells are produced by pre-existing cells. Charles Darwin's theory of natural selection had an enormous impact on biology. Kate then closed the thick textbook and slid under the covers with a feeling of quiet confidence settling over her before she fell sound asleep. Sitting in the exam room with the biology test paper in front of her, she felt calm. She knew she'd studied, but it made it easier to remember information that interested her. The exam administrator stood up to speak. This is your Semester 1 exam for Foundation Biology and its history. Boys probably have an advantage just because their brains are wired that way. But if you studied hard, girls should be okay. You may now begin the exam. Kate's stomach dropped. After the biology exam concluded, Kate rushed over to the physics building. She always felt a bit out of place in her physics class, as she was one of just 3 girls in a class of 25. She scooted into a chair next to her friend Andy just before the teacher began handing out results from the previous exam. While she didn't put much work into physics, she always scored consistently well. She never quite felt confident. Her nervousness increased as the teacher made their way to Andy and Kate's table. Andy was first. "Congratulations, Andy, a 96%, the teacher said, and Andy beamed. "You are a naturally gifted young man." The teacher continued, "I hope you're going to keep physics up into uni. You could make a fantastic career out of it." The teacher's eyes then settled on Kate. "And Kate, also a 96%. Well done. I know how much effort you put in and how hard you worked for this. Congratulations." After physics and electronics, Kate decided to pop in to visit her school's career counselor. Uni applications were coming up, and she wanted to know which university she should put in as her first preference. Mrs. Meyer welcomed her into the office, and she sat down. "Well, Kate, to work out which uni you should go to, I need to know what you're interested in studying," Mrs. Meyer smiled. "Well, I enjoy anatomy and physics, and I love maths. What's a career where I can use these subjects that I find interesting?" Kate thought to herself. "I think a teaching degree is for me," Kate decided. "I can still interact with the subjects that I love, but I'm able to care for children too, which is a woman's job. It would be a flexible position to have if I have children in the future too." Now, open your eyes and think about this. Psychological studies have found that in elementary school, some parents, even subconsciously, express lower expectations for daughters than sons' abilities in maths and science, and as a result, attribute their successes differently. One study found that a daughter's success was often attributed to effort and hard work, while a son's success stems from innate talent. When female students are in high school, research has shown that girls are subtly reminded of the stereotype that science is for boys due to the lack of female scientists in school science textbooks and curricula. When attending university, the lack of women in STEM majors is generally quite apparent, especially in the physical sciences and related disciplines, subjects like physics, mathematics, engineering, and computer science. Research indicates that subtle cues in STEM environments, such as low female representation and even the presence of stereotypically masculine objects, decreases a woman's sense of belonging in these fields and reduces their interest in pursuing STEM majors. Now, there's a saying, which many of you may know, you cannot be what you cannot see. Unfortunately, there's some truth to this. We need role models to demonstrate what is possible. Now, on top of all of this, the influence of peer attitudes on gender STEM stereotypes should not be underestimated. Psychologist Jennifer Saucerman researched the role of peer attitudes towards women in STEM. She found that gender plays a role in peer attitudes towards maths and science, particularly as girls move from childhood to adolescence. Girls whose friends conveyed a support for maths and science pursuits, along with girls with gender egalitarian beliefs, were more motivated to pursue STEM topics than those whose friends endorsed gender-typical roles. She also found that the relationship between peer attitudes towards science and individual attitudes towards science grows stronger through the middle school years and peaks in strength as children enter high school. Now, what are the stereotypes of women in STEM? Now we're going to address 4 common stereotypes of women in STEM careers. This is a chance for you all to participate, so you all should have access to an instant messenger box within the Skype app. Please type in what you think a common perception about women in STEM is. So what's a common perception about women in STEM? And send that comment through to us. Then we can see what you think some common stereotypes might be. So I'll give you a minute to type in some of those comments. Great. Okay. So far we have one that they must be really, really smart and nerdy. Researchers. Teachers. We are emotional. They don't wear makeup and heels. They're antisocial. Less than usual, so just not good enough. These are really great ideas, and I really appreciate everybody participating and engaging in this one. As you know, we have limited time, so we can only cover 4 common stereotypes of women in STEM today, but these are by no means the only stereotypes out there. Here are the 4 that we'll tackle. 1, women have less academic success. 2, STEM is not feminine. 3, you can't be a mom and work in STEM. And 4, STEM careers involve solitude. So we'll move on to the next slide and tackle stereotype 1, women have less academic success. While a common assumption, it is completely unfounded and untrue. In the United States, the academic success of girls now equals or exceeds that of boys at high school and university levels. In Europe, data also shows that women outnumber men regarding education levels and diplomas. In France, for example, in 2010, 51% of women received diplomas of higher education versus just 37% of men. Here in Australia, 56% of undergraduates and half of PhD students are female, and almost 60% of junior science lecturers are female. However, in STEM, women comprise about 16% of top-level professors. That figure rises to 23% if you include medicine. Now, when Tanya Monroe arrived at Adelaide University in 2005, she was its first female professor of physics, even though there had been physics professors there since the 1880s. It took more than 100 years, 125 years to be exact. In 2002, Nalina Joshi was appointed the first woman professor of mathematics at the University of Sydney, Australia's oldest university. Discover Her argues that, quote, in any field where there's a dominance of one particular character type, and in this particular situation, it's men, then you can get these cultural norms being created that are particular to that group, and that ends up resulting in sexism. Now, sometimes there's a conscious bias against women in STEM, but sometimes there are subconscious judgments being made about women, preventing them from getting a fair go, even if skills and experience are equal. A 2014 study found that without any information other than a candidate's appearance, which generally made their gender explicitly clear, both males and females are twice as likely to hire a man over a woman to complete a mathematics task. A 2016 study published just earlier this year found that both male and female undergraduates were more likely to explain a woman's science-related setbacks by mentioning factors about her such as, she was let go because she messed up an experiment, whereas a man's setbacks are more likely to be explained by contextual factors, such as, he was let go because there were budget cuts. So where does the stereotype that men are smarter than women come from? In part, children's TV shows on channels like Disney and Nickelodeon, they often portray young women and girls as dumb or ditzy. Take the children's show Jessie, which depicts a small-town Texas girl who moves to New York City and becomes a nanny to a celebrity couple's 4 children, for example. In that show, Jessie's portrayed as bumbling and incompetent, in contrast to the 4 smart children she cares for. Disney Channel's Shake It Up portrays teenage girls as shallow, vain, and ditzy, perpetuating the notion that young women can be little more than cute or pretty. In the film Mean Girls, protagonist Katie pretends to be bad at math and intentionally gets lower grades in order to get the male lead Aaron to tutor her. Even when she joins the mathletes team, she's the only female. In the opposing math team, there's also only one female competitor who has a stereotypically nerdy appearance. Another example of how gender stereotypes are perpetuated for girls and how the prioritization of beauty can affect a girl's career pathway is through fashion. Now, the t-shirt on the left in which the print states, "I'm too pretty to do homework, so my brother has to do it for me," was marketed by the U.S. company JCPenney to girls between ages 7 to 16. The caption next to the photo of the girl, of the shirt on the online store read, "Who has time for homework when there's a new Justin Bieber album out? She'll love this tee that's just as cute and sassy as she is." The Allergic to Algebra t-shirt was sold online by Forever 21 before taking it down due to a, understandably, public outcry on social media. Another female t-shirt wrote, "School sucks," inserting a K into the spelling of school. However, there were no shirts that alluded to education in the men's section of the website. We sure have a long way to go. Moving on now to the next slide, which will talk about stereotype 2, STEM is not feminine. Psychologist Jennifer Sossaman has found that from early childhood to adulthood, women and girls encounter overt and subtle messages that lead them to believe that failures in STEM disciplines are due to a lack of ability, that men are naturally more talented in STEM fields, and that identifying oneself as feminine is at odds with identifying as a professional in STEM fields. She also argues that the portrayals of science and math in the media have the potential to influence girls' attitudes and performance in STEM fields through the direct representation of science as a masculine endeavor. Now, the degree to which this message can be detected varies according to the intended audience of the programming. Scientists as characters in popular media have a fairly narrow and specific profile. They tend to be male, wear a lab coat and glasses, have unruly hair, work alone, perhaps because of deficient social skills. Whereas scientists in programs targeted at children may behave in non-gendered ways more often than in the general media. Male scientists still far outnumber female scientists in these programs, however. Even in programs specifically designed to reduce gender stereotypes and increase interest in science, some of which have shown promising results, one study found that latent gender stereotypes remained in these well-intentioned programs. Women can also struggle when attempting to balance the need to behave in masculine ways in order to be seen as competent, but yet also be expected to be girly and feminine. So women find themselves walking a tightrope between being seen as too feminine to be competent and too masculine to be likable. Now, in a recent study published in Harvard Business Review, over half of the female scientists surveyed experienced backlash for displaying stereotypically masculine behaviors, like speaking their minds directly or being decisive. A microbiologist said, "I've gotten remarks like, I didn't expect someone Indian and female to be like this." An astrophysicist stated she'd had to damp down her ambition and become as amiable as possible, going as far as to hide prizes in media attention. On the other hand, if women are assertive, direct, outspoken, or competitive, they may face dislike or even ostracism within their field. Psychologists contribute that one of the challenges facing adult women in STEM fields has to do with perceptions of warmth and competence, two major factors that influence how humans perceive and react to others. People who are perceived to be high in both competence and warmth tend to be both well-liked and well-respected. People high in competence but low in warmth tend to be respected but are often disliked, especially if they're considered to be in competition for resources. People low in competence but high in warmth tend to be liked but not respected. They may be pitied or patronized by others. Women in traditionally female fields are typically considered high in warmth but low in competence. For instance, a study has shown that people have very warm feelings about kindergarten teachers, but do not often recognize them as highly competent professionals. Women in STEM fields, which are considered to be quote-unquote male domains, especially struggle to be perceived as being as competent as their male coworkers. However, when female workers are demonstrably competent in their work in a gender-incongruent domain, their perceived warmth plummets. Successful women in male-dominated career fields are often considered uncivil or cold. Being disliked in the workplace can result in missed job opportunities, promotions, or pay increases. Ultimately, this phenomenon creates a double bind for women. To the degree that these shifting criteria operate in her workplace, a female worker who is considered friendly may be passed over for a promotion because a male coworker is perceived to be better at the job. But a female worker who is clearly skilled at her job may be passed over for a promotion because she's considered unfit for a position that requires interpersonal skills. These stereotypes are strengthened by the poor representation of women scientists in the media and entertainment industries, even if progress is being made, with more leading roles in sci-fi movies, given to women like Sandra Bullock in Gravity or Daisy Ridley in the most recent Star Wars film. Moving on to the next slide. Emma Johnston, who's a professor of marine ecology and ecotoxicology at the University of New South Wales and the director of the Sydney Harbour Research Program, says, "The problem appears to be rather complex. There are a lot of different points along what we call the leaky pipeline at which women drop out. Some of them are cultural. Some of them are biases that are unconscious biases, so they're really difficult to tackle. One example is the lack of female role models. We know that when there aren't role models in front of you that you can identify with, that actually reduces your confidence in your ability to do that particular job. It doesn't just do that, it also reduces the attractiveness of that job. So women at some point will say, look, this is all too hard. No one wants me to be here anyway. And that's when they'll drop out. An extensive study conducted by Parmenter on the environment of Indigenous Australian women in the Australian mining industry that was conducted in 2011 found that many Indigenous women who were interviewed at a Century mine spoke of the extra burden of having family responsibilities and the need to prove yourself at a mine site. One woman said, and I quote, "The most annoying thing is that women work hard and they are still the mothers. They still got to do all the work at home and come up here and have to do more work than men because they have to prove themselves. It's even harder for an Indigenous woman. You feel like you're being monitored more. If women showed any form of weakness, they were reminded of their femaleness." For example, a group of women agreed that whenever there was a circumstance when they had to leave their shift due to illness, responses from men included, "You're going home early because you're a woman. If you were a man, you'd stay." Whereas nobody said anything to male workers in the same situation. A few women who had some experience in a temporary supervisory role said that the men they supervised were unwilling to take orders. One woman said, "Men don't like taking orders from a woman. If a bloke tells them, they go out and do it straight away, but if we do, they don't." Another woman told a story of how she managed this pushback from men. "I wrote instructions for the day on the board rather than tell them directly. If I did have to speak to them, I'd start with, 'Would you mind doing me a favor?'" Moving on to the next slide, Stereotype 3. You can't be a mom and work in a STEM field. Now, not every woman wants to be a mother, but for women with children, it is more difficult to follow their career, and they can hit the maternal wall. Hildegard Nemaskeren, a German chemist, argues that the effect of children on a woman's career becomes prominent when it comes to transferring from university to a professional life, whether that be a professional life in academia or industry. There are less flexible working hours and sometimes job-related traveling that can limit opportunities of females in STEM and can cause a conflicting situation where women come under pressure and tend to step away from their career pathway. Emma Johnston argues that one of the structural barriers to women in STEM careers is maternity leave. In an interview with ABC Radio, she elaborated that whilst maternity leave is available for women, it can actually be difficult for women to re-enter the workplace, depending on when they're taking that maternity leave. Now, if they don't have a secure position, taking maternity leave can affect their re-employment opportunities as well when returning back to work. When professional women have children, they often find themselves running into a wall. Their commitment and competence are questioned, and opportunities can start drying up. In a survey, nearly 2/3 of scientists with children reported running into this form of bias across all races and ethnic groups. Women felt they were competing with men who had stay-at-home wives, and that colleagues often assumed that they would lose their drive after they had children. The fact that there is such a disparity between men and women in science careers is often misinterpreted as a result of the difficulty of balancing work life and private life. However, many women have proven in other demanding fields that having a family and a successful career is doable and even necessary. This goes to a broader solution that ultimately we should all share in the caring and raising of children. UN Women strongly supports parental leave being readily available and encouraged for men and for women. When caring for young children becomes a shared parental effort, this means that women are more likely to be able to get back into their roles in science more quickly. Now, the tech industry has a very competitive parental benefit scheme materializing, as some tech companies are employing more millennials, and as a generation, millennials value paid leave more than their elders did. As the tech industry is so competitive in business, it's also competitive in attracting and retaining talent. So generous parental leave policies are seen as one way to attract women into a traditionally male-dominated industry and increase the amount of gender diversity in the workplace. Facebook has declared that it will extend its 4-month paid parental leave policy to be available to employees worldwide. This was after Facebook's founder and chief executive, Mark Zuckerberg, decided he'd take 2 months leave after the birth of his daughter. Adobe offers paid parental leave to 26 weeks of paid maternity leave and 16 weeks of paid time for primary caregivers. This includes those who become parents through childbirth, surrogacy, adoption, or foster care. Amazon, Apple, Netflix, they all have really interesting progressive policies. Now, these paid parental leave policies are certainly a step in the right and hopefully will be generously replicated, both inside and outside the tech industry. Moving on to the next slide to talk about our last stereotype for today's purposes. STEM careers involve solitude. It's lonely business. A Harvard Business Review study uncovered a pattern of bias that seems to have a big impact in particular on women of color. In the survey, 42% of Black women agreed with the statement, "I feel that socially engaging with my colleagues may negatively affect perceptions of my competence." Only slightly more than Latinas at 38%, Asian American women at 37%, and white women at 32%. Discover discusses that science in particular does have a reputation for being built on individual achievement and solo endeavors, which can be a deterrent. However, it's important to recognize how interdependent the scientific disciplines really are. The lines between science can be quite blurry. Biology needs chemistry and physics, physics needs math, psychology needs biology and neurology, and so on and so forth. Science and other STEM fields are a team sport in terms of both research and material work. Interdisciplinary collaborations provide insights, perspectives, and progress towards new discoveries that could not otherwise have been made. These stereotypes of women in STEM careers are having a negative impact on how women and girls are perceived in relation to STEM. A survey organized by the Royal Society of London for Improving Natural Knowledge revealed 90% of 18 to 24-year-olds could not name a female scientific figure, either in modern day or a historical figure. A 2009 study found that middle school girls scored highest on tests measuring visual spatial abilities, which are key to success in engineering, chemistry, medicine, and architecture, fields that promise high-paying, prestigious jobs down the road, when they were led to believe that there were no gender differences on the tasks. Now, in remembering our visualization exercise where we all were Kate, you won't be surprised to hear that when they were told that boys do better on these tasks, girls did more poorly. Interestingly, when they were given no information, allowing cultural stereotypes to operate, they also did poorly. The stereotypes, sadly, were already ingrained. We're going to move into the third section of the webinar. Now, how can stereotypes be overcome? It's important to realize and acknowledge stereotypes exist, but how can we make sure that women are not negatively affected by them? For the next generation, we've got to start young. By first or second grade, both girls and boys have the notion that math is a boy thing. But a 2011 study by psychologist Anthony Greenwald of the University of Washington found that there's a window of opportunity during these early years in which, while girls do see math largely as a male preserve, they haven't yet made the connection that, because I am a girl, math is not for me. During this important but short period, girls are relatively open to the idea that they can enjoy and do well at math. This is a great age to play with toys that are not limited by gender stereotypes, to encourage play and imagination and the accumulation of different skills, such as girls playing with construction sets. By making sure that both boy and girl children have equal opportunities at a young age, it's important to break the barrier of gender stereotypes. We must encourage them to explore any career that they're interested in, regardless of gender. Now, for current women interested in STEM, the key to reducing the representation gap of women in STEM is to, 1, firstly, we have to raise awareness, break stereotypes, and inform oneself about STEM career opportunities. 2, stimulate interest, motivate girls to pursue STEM throughout active discovery. 3, guide and support, help female scientists, engineers, mathematicians, tech gurus engage in scientific study and provide tools for success. And 4, finance, ensure that monetary concerns are not the determining factor. This approach can only be successful if the entire ecosystem is engaged, including parents, educators, and authorities. So the 2 key areas for practically breaking these stereotypes and not letting them affect you include improving your confidence and increasing and retaining your interest in STEM. Moving on to the next slide about improving confidence. Girls who learned about gender discrimination, including learning about famous scientists who face discrimination, increased their confidence in doing science and increased their belief in the value of science. Think about turning your hobbies into career prospects. We'll look a lot more at this in depth at the next webinar on the 1st of November, so mark your diaries now. We will be introducing some amazing STEM women with you shortly. We hope that these women and their stories will continue to build upon your confidence. Here are some of the STEM role models. Moving to the next slide, Denisse Leyton. Denisse is an Australian National University microbiologist. She was awarded her PhD in 2008 for a study undertaken at Monash University on autotransporters, a superfamily of bacterial outer membrane proteins typically found in bacterial pathogens responsible for infectious diseases, such as diarrhea, whooping cough, cholera, chlamydia, and bacterial meningitis. Here, she identified 2 novel autotransporter proteins and determined how their function contributed to bacterial virulence. After researching in the UK and at Monash University, she took up a joint appointment between the ANU Research School of Biology and Medical School, where she will teach microbiology to med students. At the ANU, her research group will focus on understanding the mechanisms of autotransporter assembly, their function, and on their re-engineering for biotechnological applications. She said that her interest in research about infectious disease and bacterial pathogens began while in her teens. Since year 12, when I had a fabulous biology teacher, and so it went from there. I've also had a very prominent mentor in my scientific life to help. It's incredibly important. I know for me, having a female PhD supervisor was really nice. I learned so much from her and from seeing her in that position at that time. You cannot be what you cannot see. Remember that one. Moving on to Karlie Kloss. Karlie is an American supermodel who debunks stereotypes about women in STEM by her passion for coding. And this is a quote from Karlie. Over the last year, I started taking coding classes and realized how creative coding truly is. Code is going to continue to play a major role in defining our future. I think it's crucial that young women learn to code as early as possible to ensure that we as young women have a voice and a stake in what the world looks like. Karlie Kloss has also created a Code with Karlie scholarship for 20 girls ages 13 to 18 in partnership with Flatiron School in New York, which is a 2-week program teaching girls to code, something worth looking into for sure. Moving on to the next slide. So moving on to the next role model, Dr. Eva Chang. Eva is a lecturer in the School of Engineering, Electrical and Computer Engineering to be specific, at RMIT University in Melbourne. She completed a PhD in speech and audio signal processing, but she has since branched out into multimedia signal processing research. And I quote, as you see on your screen, I work with a variety of people on a number of different projects, from microphone arrays to better record directional sound, surround sound speakers for immersive auditory environments, to developing automatic image and video object tracking algorithms to help biologists to better understand the movement and behavior of cells. It wasn't until the internet became a consumer technology during high school that I became fascinated with the potential for instant access to information and connecting people all over the globe. This led to my studying a telecommunications engineering degree, and when I discovered the field of signal processing in 3rd year, I found a way to combine my passion for music with my passion for technology. Fantastic. Moving on to learn more about Dr. Josephine Birungi. Dr. Birungi works at Biosciences Eastern and Central Africa at the International Livestock Research Institute in Nairobi, where she is the technology manager. And I quote, there is no satisfaction greater than tangibly making a difference in the lives of people. My current work has provided a platform for me to contribute towards making a difference in the livelihoods of African farmers. I believe in the potential of agriculture to eradicate poverty in Africa, and to be in my current job is a privilege. My struggles have been more with hearing me out. I happen to have worked in the same place where my father worked, and it's the same area I was brought up in. Joining the Uganda Virus Research Institute, which hosts the HIV vaccine trial unit and where I worked as senior principal research officer, I would hear remarks in meetings like, "You were not born yet." For that reason, I have had people questioning how I got there when I have been promoted to higher positions. I have had to prove myself by working hard and having my CV speak on my behalf. Let's now look to space travel with Dr. Mae Jemison. Dr. Jemison was incredibly fascinated with space travel. It was an aspiration of hers from a very early age to become a space traveler, and together with inspiration from astronaut predecessors Guy Bluford Jr. and Sally Ride, Jemison not only achieved her goal of flying in space, but also did so as the first African-American woman on September 12, 1992. Although she had the support of her family, teachers, and school staff discouraged her from pursuing an education in science. Sometimes people want to tell you to act or to be a certain way. Sometimes people want to limit you because of their own limited imaginations. Dr. Jemison says, don't let anyone rob you of your imagination, your creativity, or your curiosity. It's your place in the world. It's your life. Go on and do all you can with it and make it a life you want to live. You have the right to be involved. You have something important to contribute, and you have to take the risk to contribute it. Dr. Jemison she attended Stanford University at 16 and earned a degree in chemical engineering and African American studies. She then went on to receive her medical degree from Cornell and served 2 years in the Peace Corps in West Africa as a staff physician, where her responsibilities there included managing the healthcare service delivery system for the Peace Corps and the U.S. Embassy in Liberia and Sierra Leone. Her background includes research in nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy, reproductive biology, and hepatitis B and rabies vaccine. After she returned from space, Dr. Jemison visited an elementary school, and the principal told her that at his school, he planned to have male teachers inform the children about the opportunities at space camp, since men are more knowledgeable in science. Dr. Jemison, as you can imagine she would, asserted that one has to be mindful of preconceived ideas and perceptions of individuals. Moving on, let's learn about the first female Indigenous Australian pilot, Virginia Wykes. Virginia got her pilot's license in 1982, but it wasn't until 20 years later that she found out she was Australia's first female Aboriginal pilot, after a woman from the Powerhouse Museum began to study female pilots in Australia. When watching a TV program, Virginia was inspired to get her pilot license. She said that the show was about a 17-year-old girl in parks who was learning to fly. And she thought to herself, if she could, maybe I could. In 2001, she partnered with Steve Hervinen, who is Australia's first Aboriginal commercial pilot, and together they took part in the Sydney to London air race. They called themselves the Dreamtime Team and traveled all over the world. Now let's travel to foreign seas and learn about Emmy Noether. Emmy Noether was a German-Jewish mathematician known for her landmark contributions to abstract algebra and theoretical physics. She has been described as the most important woman in the history of mathematics. As one of the leading mathematicians of her time, she developed the theories of rings, fields, and algebra. In physics, Noether's theorem explains the connection between symmetry and conservation laws. After completing her dissertation in 1907, she worked at the Mathematical Institute of Erlangen without pay for 7 years. Without pay for 7 years. At the time, women were largely excluded from academic positions. In 1915, she was invited to join the mathematics department at the University of Göttingen, a world-renowned center of mathematical research. The philosophical faculty objected, however, and she spent 4 years lecturing under David Hilbert's name. Moving on, let's profile a few young people, aspiring young women in STEM. Olivia Hallisey was the 2015 Google Science Fair Grand Prize winner at just 17 years old. Her diagnostic tool for the Ebola virus delivers results in less than 30 minutes and allows for rapid detection even when patients lack any symptoms whatsoever. The design includes a silk-containing card that stores Ebola antibodies without refrigeration. She says, I knew I wanted a simple and stable solution to a complex problem like infectious diseases, so I started looking into ways on how to limit the spread of this deadly disease. I would just encourage girls to try it in the beginning, remind them that they don't have to feel naturally drawn or feel like they have a special talent for math or science, but really just look at something they're interested in and then think how to improve something or make it more enjoyable or relate it to their interests. What an amazing story of a young woman who's created a life-changing diagnostic at the age of 17. Incredible. Now, let's meet 3 16-year-old Irish girls who won the fair by using bacteria to grow food the year before. Sophie Healy-Thau, Emir Hickey, and Ciara Judge. After 11 months of experiments, these 3 girls found that seeds treated with bacteria sprouted 50% faster than untreated seeds did. At harvest, the microbes increased barley and oats yields by as much as 70%. So whether it's transforming agriculture, developing diagnostic tools for disease, there are so many ways that you as girls, young women, teachers, others engaged can really make a difference in STEM. Now, to increase and keep up that momentum of your interest in STEM, I have 3 suggestions. So, research, and even better, get to know some high-achieving female role models who have overcome difficulty to get to know where they are that you relate to. So get to know some high-achieving female role models. Inspiration can be a fantastic motivator. Consider practical, real-life application of the concepts and theories that you're learning. Bridging the gap between technology and your education can also be really helpful. It used to be considered important for students to not use technology and power down during school hours. However, this can result in a disconnect from the real world. Integrating your technology and your education can give you access to much more information about subjects that interest you and their recent developments. But more on that in the next seminar in November. In our information pack that will be emailed to you after the webinar, we will also include a link for you to be able to view Edutopia's STEM Everywhere video series, where they look at how STEM is everywhere, from science-based internships to student-run makerspaces. Moving on to the next slide, here are some more practical ideas for changing and challenging stereotypes head-on. Do the subjects, research projects, hobbies that you enjoy and are passionate about, and consider turning the things you enjoy and find the most fascinating into a career. Do the things you love and consider how they could create a future for you down the track. Ignore what people around you might say. Remember Emma Watts's engineering tweet. Make sure you have and try to foster around you a supportive mentality instead of a competing with other women mentality. Find a mentor or support network for encouragement. This could be family, friends, teachers, mentor programs such as the Curious Minds Project by the Australian Mathematics Trust. The Curious Minds Project is a hands-on extension and mentoring program to ignite girls' passion in science, technology, engineering, and maths. The program is designed for girls in years 8 to 10 and is a 6-month program that combines 2 residential camps and a mentoring program. Now, we're going to look at 2 women for our case studies who've overcome confidence and stereotype barriers. The next slide features Dr. Anne-Sophie Dielen. She's a biochemist and molecular biologist. She also started a website which led to the League of Remarkable Women in Australian Science exhibition about top female scientists after experiencing obstacles in her own career. She said that she had a lot of issues with self-confidence and a belief that I wasn't good enough to be able to do this research work. So I wanted to give female university and high school students positive examples and show them stories, have role models and mentors. They shouldn't listen to people who say girls don't do science or physics, and yes, they can do it. Her website is intended to encourage girls into STEM careers with role models and mentors, and the link to her website will be in the post-webinar resources email, so watch out for that. Kathryn Parsons is the co-founder of Decoded, a London-based tech startup which aims to increase digital literacy. Decoded's signature one-day course claims to train participants without any background in computers to code in a day. She studied languages at Cambridge and can speak Japanese, Ancient Greek, and Latin. After graduating, Kathryn worked in digital media and technology, but left to start up her own business, an advertising agency which used digital innovation and creation for brands. She quickly realized that pushing the limits of what was digitally possible relied on code. She said that coding writing conjures up images of boys in dark basements eating pizza and drinking beer, but that's a dangerous caricature. The number of women in technology is worryingly low. However, in my experience, the appetite among professional women to become digitally literate is reassuringly high. Women are consumers and users of tools and products still overwhelmingly dreamt up and created by men. She says, people create all these barriers for themselves before they've tried it. She says, describing the biggest difference between men and women in her fairly equally gender-split classes as confidence rather than ability. Now, next, I would like to welcome colleagues from Avanade. Avanade, as I said, is our Breaking Barriers program partner, and I'd like to introduce you to Karlie Kloss, Director, Delivery Management, Deirdre McIntosh, Group Manager, Solution Development, Software Engineering, and Lenka Stambulic, Group Manager, Change Enablement. Karlie, Deirdre, and Lenka, are you all on the line?
Yes.
Fantastic. Hello. I'd like to start by asking you a few questions, Karlie. So I'll ask you 4 questions. Firstly, what stereotypes did you face as a woman in STEM?
Thanks, Janelle. Well, I guess through my career, and as you can see there, I've worked in IT for over 15 years now, I've been lucky enough not to face anything directly offensive in my career. There has been a lot of subtle overtones that I've had to work through in that time, though. And I have faced, lots of comments and expectations where I would be automatically expected to take notes in a meeting, for example. Or I find it takes me a lot longer to build up integrity and trust when I meet new people. So that's something that I've really worked through over my career.
Yeah, fascinating. So, for example, you said just now, one example is people just prescribing a role to you. So, hey, Karlie, you'll be taking notes today, right?
Yes.
That is a simple example. How have you overcome and challenged some of the stereotypes that you've experienced? That may be the one that you want to speak to, or you may want to speak to others.
Yeah, so for that one, I would respond with, yeah, sure, I'll be happy to take notes today. How about you take them next time? So in that case, we're sharing the responsibility up front. I've set their expectations that it's not something that I need to be doing all of the time, and that we are equals and we can share that responsibility.
Super. Thanks for that, Karlie. Now, did you or do you currently have a mentor or support network that helps you?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's very important that you surround yourself with a very supportive network. And I would say that's not just in the workplace, but also in your home life as well. So I've been brought up in a very supportive environment. I grew up with a brother, and my parents were always very conscious of treating us equally and making sure we had the same opportunities. So I would be encouraging everyone to seek out people who support them in what they want to do.
Fantastic, Karlie. And the last question for you, who is your STEM role model? Do you have any female STEM role models?
So I picked a role model who I think everyone would know, Quentin Bryce. Now, I'm probably stretching the STEM definition here a little bit because I know her background is in law, though I think she's been a very prominent role model in breaking down barriers. She became our first female Governor General. She's been a great advocate for supporting working families, and now she's moving into the domestic violence space. So a little bit grey there, but I think still promoting a lot of our positive values that we look for in role models.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for participating in the panel, Karlie, and sharing some of your own personal experience. It's really important to put a face and a voice to women who are currently involved in really successful STEM careers. So I'd next like to introduce Deirdre McIntosh. So Deirdre, as I mentioned, is Group Manager, Solution Development, Software Engineering at Avanade. So Deirdre, kicking off the first question for you, what stereotypes did you face as a woman in STEM?
Hi, how you doing? Look, I suppose for me it was the stereotype for me when I was returning to work after having children, and I was really quite concerned around what people would think of me and whether they would be judging me on my commitment and my drive and ambition, because now as a working mother, I wouldn't be able to work the same long hours and wouldn't be as relevant. So in effect, though, in reality, when I did come back, I was actually a lot more time efficient, working harder than I previously was, because I had time constraints now. So I had to, no longer was I hanging around the water cooler having chats as such. I was actually really quite diligent around doing what I could during my work hours so that I could leave at a reasonable time, to have that balance between having kids and working. But in fact, 9 months into the role, I kind of, I was judging myself for leaving, and I looked around and there was 2 or 3 other blokes leaving, which I hadn't actually noticed. And all of them had young kids as well, and they were dealing with the same things. I'd actually stereotyped myself when in fact the people around me, there were blokes that were leaving, had the same time constraints, they were going to pick up kids and had young babies as well. So I think really the stereotype in that instance, where I'd actually judged myself and I was being really harsh around my own value within the workplace because I was a working mother. So that was it was quite enlightening for me to not be so harsh on myself, and in fact, there's other people in the same role and you still are offering value within the workforce, regardless of whether you're a working mother or a working father.
That's great, Deirdre, and I think it's really important to name the fact that oftentimes, and this isn't to put a spotlight on you in particular, but it is not uncommon to bring our own biases to work, where we're thinking caring responsibilities are largely taken care of by women in the workplace, but to actually recognize that and model within your own workforce that men and women, regardless of the family makeup at home, do share in those caring responsibilities, and to really prove the effectiveness and productivity that you're able to deliver within reasonable working hours is a great way to combat the feeling or the perception and sense of your concern that you may be perceived as less committed and less relevant in the workforce. So, yeah, really interesting. Thank you for sharing that story. Have you had a mentor that has supported you or a support network that you're a part of, either in the past and currently as well?
Yeah, no, I do. I think one of your previous speakers, Jane Heaton, I've known her for pre-children and post-children, and she's been a great source of inspiration. And certainly we catch up very regularly to talk about, my career and my aspirations. But she's been really influential because she's someone who I can look up and see, in roles above me, so that I know that it's possible, even though she has children and all of that. And she's been really great for my self-belief around what I can achieve. So yeah, it's been great confidence boosting to have someone to share experiences and not that having, no judging around it as well. So
that's fantastic and wonderful. So Jane is within the Avanade family, so it must be wonderful to have somebody within your workplace that you're able to lean on as a support and a mentor as well. In addition to Jane, is there anybody else that you'd like to add as your STEM female role model? This could be somebody that you don't have direct contact with, but somebody that you read about when you were 8 years old or when you were considering doing the studies you did.
Yeah, I've got 2. So the first one will be the classic Sheryl Sandberg. I really, really enjoyed reading her book, Lean In, and just her recognizing women's tendency to take a little bit more of a submissive role. And she's got some really great practical tips around in meetings, leaning in and making sure that you're not sitting at the back of the office and all of that sort of thing. And just an example of that, just a personal story that I experienced, that women's tendency to be more submissive and not value themselves. I was going for a role a few years back. I'd worked with a guy and he'd moved jobs, and I was going for a role in the same company that he was now working for. We were both equal and we were friends, and I kind of asked him, how much should I ask for? I had no idea. And he quoted back to me a number that was $15,000 more than what I was thinking. I couldn't believe it. We were the same, we'd worked the same levels, and he was moved over to the same role that I was going for, and I'd undervalued myself by 15 grand. So I went for that role and asked for the money that he said I should ask for. I got the role and got that money, but the lesson that taught me was that I think women inherently undervalue themselves. And so, you know, if I was to leave you with a kind of a parting kind of comment, really, was don't stereotype yourself. Like, value your worth and your contribution, and every time you go for a job, add 15 grand to it, because you never know what you can get.
That's a really fantastic story. Thank you so much. Very wise words for all of us to take away today. Deirdre, thank you for that. And Lenka, Group Manager, Change Enablement, I'd like to invite you to answer the same question. So to kick it off, what stereotypes did you face or have you faced as a woman in STEM?
Hi, everybody. Well, look, for me, I've been thinking about this question for a little bit, actually, since I agreed to be on this panel, and I couldn't come up with one. And I think it comes predominantly from the fact that I come from a little village in a communist Czech Republic, and I grew up, I think, in a very limited environment. I like your quote, you cannot be what you cannot see. So the highest achievement I could think of when I was little was to become a local florist in the Czech Republic. And so as now, you know, fast forward 30 years, I have a degree, I live in Australia, I'm becoming an Australian citizen this week, and I really enjoy working in IT. And all the stereotypes I faced were my own. They were my own limitations. They were my own, you should not, and you should, and you cannot. And so it's been, you know, being daily confronted with what is my frame of world, what is my world frame, and what's the frame of a woman of a modern society in Australia, in a modern company like Avanade, who is encouraging women to work and take a maternity leave and take on challenges. So yeah, I had a very different, slightly similar experience to Deirdre, where it's all been me.
Yeah, fascinating. Thank you for sharing your story, Lenka. What would you say is a single catalyst that enabled you to break through your own perception of what is and isn't possible, to pursue the degree, to come to Australia? Congratulations on becoming a citizen this week, by the way. Can you speak a little bit to that in terms of how you've overcome that personally?
Look, it's hard to single out one. I would probably pick meditation. I probably not an answer you expected. I find that I was exposed to meditation actually within my degree, where our HR professor took us into a Zen center, and he thought it's a really good thing to acquire as your toolkit within a busy business life. So I learned to meditate, and I found that's where I could filter through what is media-based or environment-based or mother modeling-based stereotype versus where am I, who am I, what are my desires, what do I want, and where do I not let these limited beliefs stop me from, becoming the best I can.
Interesting, and it is obviously, we all will have a different answer to that question, won't we? So thank you for sharing yours. Now, have you had a mentor or support network that has supported you along the way?
Absolutely, definitely. So as I said, I've been my own limitation, and it's been the environment that's been stretching me. So I've been extremely lucky. I think I just knew if I put myself in a positive environment that stretches me, if I keep putting myself outside my comfort zone, I will succeed. So yes, it was my couple of previous bosses. I often when I face a challenge, I do have a business coach. I've been working with several business coaches, executive coaches, and let them help me, hear myself and hear my own limitations and break through them.
Great, thank you. And then lastly, do you have a female STEM role model?
Yeah, I will concur with Deirdre on Sheryl Sandberg. I couldn't, on the quick notice now, come up with somebody new. I did know Sheryl Sandberg as my STEM role model, and I also did enjoy her book Linen very much. I think that gave me a really healthy push at the time where I was just really strongly limiting my career. And finally, when I read her book, I was courted by two men, and she in her book advised, marry a man who will support a woman who will support you in your career. And so based on her advice, I think I made a good choice.
All right, great. Thank you so much. I would like to thank Karlie, Deirdre, and Leica for sharing your personal experiences as women leaders in STEM in Avanade. And it's so important for us to hear from some of the both internal and external barriers that we've faced, that women in STEM have faced and have really combated over the course of your careers. And I think I can speak for everybody on the line just to say it's always an inspiration to hear about women who sometimes, against all odds have found really rewarding careers and will continue to be role models for the next generation of women in STEM. So thank you. I do want to just make one comment. Next, it's going to be over to you for questions. So get your questions ready, everybody, and feel free to write them down through instant messaging. I did want to add there was something that had come through in the instant messaging earlier, which was just a flag that Professor Sudha Rao at University of Canberra is working on a cure for secondary cancer. So that's yet another extraordinary STEM role model. So thank you, Christine, for sending that through. That's brilliant. So do we have any questions? Just looking through to see what's coming through. All right. Well, look, I think there are a couple things that have come out of the panel and that could be worth touching upon at this stage in the seminar. So we will be going into much more depth around what can you do to pursue your career in STEM. But one of the things that we know is so important is being able to find a support network, find mentors, create a group of people around you who will support you in being all that you can be. And so how do you actually go about finding a mentor support network? Look, here are a couple of simple ideas, and feel free if you'd like to throw some ideas on instant messaging as well. I'll read them on the line too. So in your workplace, in your school, in your university, ask the people around you. So ask teachers. Teachers are there to provide us with guidance and support to try to identify, who might be a great role model around you. I do have one that's just come through from Caroline. So in the research side of the science world, a lot of my friends have had to go overseas. Is the perception that science, perhaps more than tech, is not well supported in Australia correct? Really interesting one. So, look, I think that there is certainly a mix of understanding. We certainly know that funding is increasingly tightening in Australia, particularly in university settings, which can make research money difficult to source and secure. It doesn't mean that it's a wholesale, easily accessed overseas, but it does mean that sometimes it can be more difficult to get those research grants that can make it slightly more challenging to pursue that research base.
Can I jump in there?
Yeah, absolutely.
I've also, I'm not in the science field, but I've had a friend of mine that's, his wife is in the science field, and he said the funding model in Australia really impacts women because they do it on cycles. And if you have, so just say you get the 3-year funding, and then you have a child in that 3-year funding, it can really impact your ability to be able to, for the universities, they won't actually promote women because they're pulling out of funding. It's something to do with how they get funded, and that it impacts women's ability to progress because they're dropping out of funding models, and the funding was given to that piece of that particular person for that research. And if she drops out to have kids, it really impacts, how it really impacts the university's funding. There's quite a big correlation between it.
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
Deirdre, that's fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing that, because I think that's really important to both spotlight on the fact that if the funding is associated with an individual researcher, and there could be dropping, a man or a woman could be dropping in and out to take care of caring responsibilities, that could affect their ability to secure those multi-year grants. That's really interesting, and thank you for sharing that. And Caroline has just come through to say, that's right, the 3 to 4 year funding model is difficult as well because of the timing of having to start pitching for the next funding round. So I imagine for a lot of that, that's really around having to do the advanced planning, and then obviously typically you will have many, many months of waiting until you actually get the funding secured. So it can be difficult to plan given all that we have available to us in terms of life choices, whether that's caring, parenting, it could be caring for an elder in our lives. So it can be really difficult to do that advanced planning. So thank you, Caroline and Deirdre, for your comments on that one. Just back to finding a mentor support network, the other things that I wanted to share with you, obviously asking teachers, but do research online. There is a whole community, whether it's finding a mentor that's in your community, in your city or state or territory, or finding somebody who might be able to be a virtual mentor. And there are lots of peak bodies out there that typically will have a women in, fill in the blank, sort of section. So for example, if you're interested in engineering, Engineers Australia has a section for women in engineering. If you're interested in coding, there's a Melbourne-based organization called Code Like a Girl, and they teach and convene girls that are passionate about coding and technology. So they bring girls together who are really interested. So really it's a matter of identifying within your particular subject area of interest. Do some research online. We are in a digital age, and that's a great way to find communities of practice and communities who are willing to share, support, endorse, exchange knowledge and resources to be a guiding light along the way. So those are a couple of thoughts around finding mentors or support networks. But I think some of what the panel underscored is also that we can be impacted by so many different things. So we constantly, as we covered in this webinar, have negative messages coming through the media waves. We have negative messages coming through if we look at toys that are gendered for girls and for boys. We have a lot of gendered silos in our world that, if you look at those external influences, can pretty quickly disparage or put in despair girls like Kate, who are doing fantastic in physics and doing fantastic in biology. But to have those messages coming through, it can be quite disheartening and create a lack of confidence. So whether it's those external factors, whether it may be internal barriers, whether it may be your family, it's important to identify who are the people in your networks that can be a sounding board, can be a support, can be a coach, a mentor, and a cheerleader to enable you to do absolutely anything that you would like to do. Now, we've just had a couple of things come through on the instant messaging as well. So Christine says, I've been very fortunate to have surrounded myself with wonderful, confident, strong, and varied women of business. They are my mentors and role models. That's fantastic. Thank you, Christine, for sharing that. And Francesca says, female role models are an interesting one. In my department, there are 3 female academics. This is an engineering department, so I don't have many options right in front of me. And then our dean has told me that for women to succeed in the workplace, you need a male champion. Really interesting comment coming from your dean, Francesca. Thank you for sharing that one. I think we could all spend a lot of time probably tackling that one, but fundamentally, no matter the, and she says my dean is also female, so thank you for putting that through, Francesca. Look, obviously your dean is speaking from her experience, and fundamentally I think it's important that we continue to put in front of girls, young women, no matter where they are in their professional lives, we need to continue to put female role models in STEM front and center. I think for me, one of the things that I really did think about again and again in preparation for this webinar is you cannot be what you cannot see. We have to make sure that we continue to put a spotlight on the extraordinary women that we've met today through Avanade, through the panel, that we've introduced you to through the webinar. Women in Australia, women overseas who are doing extraordinary things, from working on establishing a cure for cancer to being the first female Aboriginal pilot. The world is your oyster, and so it's really important that all of us are working together to combat the stereotypes, put front and center women who are role models within STEM, so that we can continue to forge new pathways and break the barriers that are preventing women from succeeding in STEM careers. Now, Deborah has just put through a comment that says, I'm not adverse to male champions of change as an additional support for diversity in the workplace, but I do not think they're integral to our success. So thank you for sharing that, Deborah. I think it's important. I mean, if I go back to UN Women's He for She campaign, which was launched 2 years ago by UN Women's Global Ambassador Emma Watson, it's about men standing alongside women as champions, and we all need to work together as champions for gender equality. So it's not about anybody standing in front of another, but it's about working together to ensure that we can have better access to opportunities, have more equal access to educational pathways, career pathways, etc. So just to wrap up, in summary today, we've looked at how stereotypes are constructed by repetition in the media and in pop culture. The main 4 stereotypes we examined include women have less academic success, STEM is not feminine, you can't be a mom and have a STEM career, and STEM careers involve solitude. All stereotypes are inaccurate, but they still can adversely impact us as individuals. We discussed some strategies to overcome their influence in your own life, in your school, and in your careers. So I do encourage you to find a mentor, find a support network, gain confidence by being inspired by brilliant women who've already broken barriers in STEM fields, and turn your interests and hobbies into an enjoyable career. Now, the third and final webinar in the Breaking Barriers series will be held on the 1st of November from 10 to 11:30 a.m. AST. And we will, in that webinar, be demonstrating more practical pathways, traditional and non-traditional, into STEM careers. We'll also look together at why we need you to stay passionate about STEM. So we're right on 11:30. Please look out for the email, which will include some practical resources as well as an opportunity to provide us with feedback. We obviously welcome your feedback as to how useful this has been for you in your work, in your studies, and in your career. So thanks again to Avanade for your support of the Breaking Barriers program. Thank you, everybody, for your participation today. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.